And let me introduce Shelley. I was thrilled to meet Shelley Sommers in Arizona a couple of years ago. Shelley is the author of the contemporary steamy romance series, Louisa's, is that Louisa? Yeah, Louisa's
Lisa's
Vineyard
apostrophe
series.
S Vineyard.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you, Shelley, are an award-winning screenwriter and journalist. You have served as a ghostwriter, copywriter, content writer, writing educator, consultant, book coach, and film festival founder and director. That is absolutely amazing. And Shelley loves cooking and baking, so she includes recipes she loves at the back of each book. When she's not writing, cooking, or baking, she enjoys traveling with her husband, hiking, and of course, reading. Theater, movies, and impressionist art are her favorites. On her first trip to Paris in 2024, she visited Monet's home and didn't want to leave, especially his spacious, welcoming kitchen. Thank you for joining us, Shelley. I really appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here. And it's all about writer's block. That's what we were talking about. And you wound up asking me to do this because I'd written a blog about writer's block. Um, what isn't really on your list of things was that I actually had been a book coach for a number of years. And the people I was getting were quite an interesting challenge. But let me tell you first about how I got to being the writer I am and helping other people write. My mother, an English teacher in training, had me as a young child reading by maybe 3. And by the time I got out of elementary school, maybe even 3rd grade, they tested me as being, 12th grade level. So I was reading and reading and reading. And early on, I started with fairy tales and myths. And it was almost like the reality shows now. The gods and goddesses were pretty mean and jealous. And the gods weren't very nice to each other, but it was interesting. So I was reading all those kind of different things. I read all the classics. And so I won't say I was bored in school, but I always found it exciting to read a new book because I would go to the librarian. What can I read now? And she'd give me a list. And I'd read all those books. I mean, I devoured books. So that was my fun start with liking reading. By the time I was in 6th grade, I guess I did some precursors to what wound up being a partial part of my career, which was journalism. And I loved being a journalist. It's the way you interview people. I loved interviewing people, finding out things. And I was always very excited to ask questions that no one else ever asked. We were at Frederick Forsyth before he died a number of years ago. And he's the one who writes crime novels and spy things, or wrote, excuse me, past tense. And I questioned him and I said, what's your schedule like? How do you go through the day? And he looked delighted. Nobody had ever asked him that before. It's like they want to know for their purposes. But I, as a journalist and someone who was starting to write novels myself, I wanted to know, what did he do to make it work? He got up so early, I could never do that. I'm the other end of the thing where I'll see the sun coming up when I'm finishing my work for the night. But I loved and just loved, and you're probably in the opposite one, right, Paula?
Yeah, since I moved to Kentucky, it is so difficult for me because it's a 3-hour difference. And I was used to getting up at like 5 a.m. And now it's like if I sleep until 6:30, it's like, oh, the day's half gone.
I'm the fact that we worked this schedule out is great. Anyway, so I was just working and asking people questions, and I worked for a major newspaper. But before that, I really got my feet wet. I moved into a fairly new community that had been around a while, but had just incorporated as a city. It's called Maricopa in Arizona. And Maricopa had nothing, except they did have a newspaper that started out as one of those mimeograph things that somebody did. And the woman had been doing it for probably about 6, 7 years by the time the city incorporated. And I told her when I met her one time, she would come to everything with her editor in tow. She asked me about things, and I was doing all sorts of crazy things at that point. I was selling stuff. You come to a new place, you sell stuff. So I told her, well, if you ever need a good writer, I'm a good writer. I can write for you. She remembered that. About 6 months later, I get a phone call like at 11 o'clock on a Sunday night. How'd you like to write a little bit for us? A little bit, wound up within a few months writing everything all the time, except for a few guest writers for this newspaper. And it was coming out. There weren't online things yet, which saved my life. Otherwise, I never would have had a moment off. But I was writing and writing and writing and writing, doing everything. I literally knew where the bodies were buried. I was there when the first traffic light got installed. I mean, I was in a traffic jam as they had just turned the traffic light on, which caused accidents. So there was one thing after another, but I wrote for that for 8 years. And just scheduling something to go visit family out of state was challenging. But I was really enjoying getting into it. I wound up winning some journalism awards because I was following through and trying to see what was going on with things, what was helping people. My goal was to be not a muckraker, but to find a way to do things that would be informative, be interesting, and be useful for people. And one thing that really broke my heart was a woman who was out of state. She was working, helping her son, who I guess was dying, and she wanted to come here and retire, but she was stuck taking care of him. She couldn't bring him with her. And while she was there, her house was vandalized by some really vicious kids. They tore the place apart. The entire house value went to zero. And they finally found the kids, but they were minors. Built great, right? And that broke my heart. I was in touch with the woman. I tried to help her, get tied into getting the information and trying to get what to do to try and get compensated. I think finally she did get some money through the parents, but not enough to repay. I mean, there was vile graffiti all over the walls. They'd wrecked all the appliances and the plumbing. That broke my heart. But I did everything I could to try and do good things for the world here. Yeah. And then a new person bought the paper, obviously to use it as a tax write-off, because he suddenly immediately lowered the amount of money we were already getting, which wasn't very much. And I wound up writing for the Arizona Republic, biggest paper in the state. And I wound up showing up on a good day when the editor, who told me no once, wasn't there, and his assistant, very experienced writer, great guy, asked me to send some of my articles over. He called me back so fast. They needed somebody, but originally I couldn't get my foot in the door. I got my foot in the door. For 2-3 years, I was writing and writing and writing, and I was a freelancer. But freelancers aren't supposed to write articles of substance. You're only supposed to write fluff. I didn't write a lot of fluffy stuff. I was writing things about a major upset because a community that had a golf course, the guy was trashing it, wasn't watering the stuff. It looked like a desert wasteland. We are in a desert, but golf courses aren't supposed to look like that, So, quick sip. So anyway, I tracked down the guy who was the manager, the owner in China, and I actually talked to him. And I talked to a lot of the neighbors whose properties were being devastated in terms of the values. And that became a long, ongoing series of stories. And I think when it got left, the court finally said that they had to keep it going and make it good. Nobody wanted to buy it because he'd ruined it. So I felt like I'd help the homeowners some, because they were just having these meetings where they were in despair. I mean, mostly everybody that lives there are retirees, and they were counting on that money from their houses appreciating, and the other way. So that was one of the things.
So tell us, Shelley, how did you do all of that writing without writer's block?
Well, deadlines do a lot. When you have a deadline and you're going to press and it must be out, it must be distributed, you don't have time to worry about writer's block. You sit down, and sometimes in the middle of the night after I interview people, I'd have an opening sentence. My brain is tuned into working on my behalf while I'm sleeping. And that's how I rarely ever had writer's block.
If anything, well, that's amazing, because I know I talk to people who say that they are on deadlines because they have to have, books to editors and things like that. Mm-hmm. And those deadlines sometimes make them have writer's block. I don't know if it's the stress of thinking I have to get it done and not thinking about the story. But as a former writing coach, what did you notice about how the different writers experience writer's block, and what do you think causes that? Do you think it's mindset and environment or skill, or what happens there, do you think?
Well, I had a number of different types of people who were writing. One was a big shot CEO, and he was trying to write this big story about his business and, kind of a glamour piece for himself. And yet, whenever he wanted to meet with me, he hadn't done the work. If I went online, he wanted me to work on one of those programs where it changes as you do things, but he'd be changing things. And I'm thinking, I'm wasting my time. I'm trying to review your stuff and tell you what I think could use some attention, or something should be somewhere else in the bio and the whatever it was. And I'd go on and see that I just changed something or made suggestions, and he's changing things. So I can't keep track. He became so difficult to work with. I think it became mutual that we parted ways, but he never placed it in high on his priority list. You could tell that being a big shot CEO, so he wanted to write a book. That was prestigious to write a book for him, but he never was going to accomplish it because he didn't give it the time or the energy. And I kept telling him things he needed to do, and it just wasn't happening. So I was glad we were done. But I did have someone who really wanted to write a book. And she was someone who came to me because of a story I was told to go do on her. She was literally cleaning up the trash after a football game. And she did it all the time. She was getting an award by her city. And I said, do I really have to write about somebody collecting trash? And my editor said, yes, you do. She's getting an award. Go interview her. This woman was so traumatized. And I have to be very careful not to make it too obvious who it is. But she came to me at the end of the time I interviewed her, and it was painful, pulling teeth. She was shy. You could tell she had a hard time talking to people. And I think the mindset thing, she was, all right, she'd been abused and mistreated by father and two husbands. And so at this point, she was a rich widow and trying to enjoy her life for the first time. But she was so traumatized by everything that happened to her. She actually had her cousin along visiting so that she had somebody else there with me. She was afraid to be in the room with me alone. I
Oh, that's
wasn't going to hurt
amazing.
her. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think that some of the writer's block that people experience is because they either create distractions for themselves, meaning they don't make a priority. It's like everything else has to be done first, or what about outside distractions that are really kind of out of our control?
Well, how about this, which is something people should immediately turn off if they really are serious about writing, because I see my husband all the time. He is hooked. He gets up in the morning. The first thing he does is look at all this stuff. And it's like, honey, I'm here. Do you really need to do that? And he'll tell me these awful things that are going on. And I say, that's not how I want to start my day. So, as far as distractions, people should put on headphones or earplugs, just turn off the phone, put a notice on the door, and this make it as humorous as you can. Work in progress. Do not interrupt unless fire, flood, or hurricane. And people will still interrupt you, but at least they get the idea that you really are serious about this. I mean, I've heard of people using their laundry room and writing on the top of a washer just because they're so desperate and they don't have a space to call their own. But the distractions, use the bathroom before you sit down to write, get a drink first, take care of all those needs. And when you sit down, this is something I find a lot of people don't do. If they're new to writing, especially, they have to give themselves permission to spend the time on their own behalf because they are so busy being the mother and the wife and the committee woman and the this and that, and they have to give themselves the priority. That's one of the things they really need to do. And when they don't, that's why they never write a word, and they just understand why they can't accomplish anything.
Well, I fall into that category, Shelley.
Right.
I mean,
And
my
Steve's
work in
master.
progress has been in progress for 5 years, which is ridiculous because it really only takes me a couple of years to write a book. Um, uh, and it's because I am doing so much now, doing my summits and doing these things
Yes,
and making courses that people take. And that all takes time. And I'm enjoying doing those things. Maybe they're easier for me to do than writing. I don't know, but I'm reorganizing myself
yes.
to make a
Okay.
priority of
Here,
writing. But you're
here's
right,
some, here's some
priority.
suggestions. What I tell everybody is sort of a bit of what I just said. They have to tune everything else out. You have to set a time or a place or both where you can actually focus on just that one thing. Everything else goes away. Short of somebody announcing that someone dear to you has just died, you do not interrupt yourself. You stay there and you do it. And don't check your emails, don't check your messages, posts, websites, unless you have to do research. That's acceptable. You can look up things on websites that way. But I think you have so many things that you probably need to compartmentalize really, really well. I think that you do a good job of it, but I think you have to get the mindset. And one of the things I find that is helpful, and I'll go into it a little more later. The thing that helps me get going is doing what I call take a flying leap. It sounds silly, but when I finish writing for the day, and I'm doing this more and more, I'll think, well, what I want to say next is, and I'll put it in a very succinct little phrase or sentence right after what I've written. Sometimes I put it in red. That's easy when you put it in red. You say, oh, this is what I have to focus on next. And it gives you, like I say, a flying leap into the next part that you're writing. Or if you have,
That is very true, Shelley, because I know that for myself, especially when I remember to end in the middle of a sentence, the next time I come back, it's so much easier to get started again.
yes,
Because it's like, oh yeah, that's what I was thinking of. At first, when I did that, I was afraid that I would forget my thought. But
yeah.
there's something about ending in the middle of a sentence that really spurs you on because, a period at the end is an end. And then you have to have a new thought. So
Yeah, that's why
I,
I go beyond that because I want people to get into the next thing and already be thinking of the next section or the next character who's going to speak or whatever. So that's good though. It's a good idea. Everybody doesn't necessarily work that way. I might say, duh. What was I going to say there? So I try to give myself as many cues as
yeah.
possible. I
And
have
then,
little post-it notes everywhere. My husband
uh,
was helping me set up my computer today to do this with you. And he says, you've got to get all that out of here. It took me an hour to just gather up all the little post-its
well,
for this and that and the other thing,
I hope you don't
notes
lose
and
anything important because I understand post-it notes. But you mentioned in a blog that setting yourself up the night before by thinking about your writing project
yes.
right before going to sleep. How do you think that really helps?
Well, one thing, your brain is a very active machine while you're sleeping. I have awakened in the middle of the night, first thing in the morning, and I'll have a cue. Oh, this is what I should do for her. Or this is the distraction I needed. Or even in one case, I think this is what I need to do to her. I mean, to create a turning point in the story. So I've come up with things like that in my sleep. And I'm so thrilled. Now, first I thought, well, what I should do is try and write it down on a paper. Well, because I like to write paper, but sometimes the pen wouldn't work. Or and reaching for it, I knocked it on the floor and it's dark and I don't want to wake up my husband. So that wasn't always good. I found myself, all right, I'll leave the office. I mean, I'll leave my bedroom, go to the office and jot it down on a pad or which wakes you up a little bit. But if you're really tired, you're going to go back to sleep. But there's just something about your brain processing all these ideas. So what I do before I go to sleep, I say to myself, okay, this is what I want to write next. This is what I need to know. These are the characters involved. So I give it all its components and let my brain work out what I'm going to do about it. And honestly, probably at least 1 out of 4 times, I will get the answer I need in my sleep or, when I wake up. It's thrilling. But I think you have to kind of train your brain and give it some raw material, like I'm saying, think about the characters, think about what you're planning in the sequence. Did you forget to put something in that would lead to that? Make a note to yourself that you have to, when you're getting ready for bed, I have to figure out where I can insert something that will lead to what I'm working on now. So all of those things, I have been amazed, just amazed. I even came up with a new short story to write. I have someone who's in one of those masterminds you talk about. I'm working with Paul, and he's going to launch my book again, relaunch my first book in my series because it didn't get the attention it needed. And with what you do, you're doing all this promotion and everything. I'm really trying to focus on cooking, eating, sleeping, doing things like go to the doctor and all that, and writing. So I'm not wanting at the end of the day to really sit and do promotion. So that's where I fail. I need the promotion kick in the butt. But
I think that's a challenge for every writer, a
yeah.
creative, granted there are like creative people in advertising and stuff, but promoting books is a different type of creativity. So, you had mentioned something about using spreadsheets, and what
Yes.
does that have to do with overcoming writer's block?
Okay. You're sitting there, you know you have this character in the scene, and you can't figure out what you're going to have them say or how they're going to react or what's going to go on and what will be the outcome. I have found, and I'm not a big person for trying to do spreadsheets, but I'm doing it because I find, oh, I've just introduced a new character. I forgot. How old are they? What's their background? What color eyes do they have? I had one guy in a book I wrote where I could not remember this, and he was one of the main characters. I could never remember his eye color. And his last name escaped me too. So I started a spreadsheet and I keep adding to it and adding to it because I'm now working on the fifth book in the series. And so trying to remember all the characters, here's this secretary who's in there for one scene, but oh, she might be a good potential person to date and maybe match with this guy who's their lawyer, who's very sad and lonely and he wants company. So, you have to keep all those little threads. So if you go in and you put a spreadsheet that has all the basics, what they look like, maybe how tall they are, what they enjoyed in school, what their favorite hobby is, the quirks they have. Do they save certain kinds of things? Like my mother used to save little owls. It could be anything from porcelain to stuffed owls. And I started it because I sent her this little owl, stuffed animal owl, and she started getting everybody, they'd see the owl and they'd buy her owls. She had a room full of owls. So you want to know those kind of things about your characters because you never know when it'll be useful in terms of creating more warmth and more depth to the character. I have a character who could have started out being very boring. He's a department head at the school that Louisa wants to go to. And what do you know? Will, who initially she detests because he's rude to her, it turns out he went there and that was his major. Well, not such a big surprise because his parents are the owner of the vineyard that she works at. So she wants to make a career of growing things. She loves that. So she asks him, do you know somebody I could talk to about the courses and things? Well, yeah, the department head was his mentor, and he set up an appointment for her, and she was in. He says, I want you in my class. Yeah, okay. How soon can you apply? Yesterday? And
Yeah.
so just with that connection, and initially I didn't have that in my mind to write that. She was going to go there and call the department and see what she could do and get an interview. But with Will setting her up for that interview, he calls up and says, hey, I've got somebody really good who should be in your department, our department, because that was his major. And he said, oh, okay, tell me about her. Well, they hadn't started dating yet. So he just said all these nice things about her. It wasn't that he was madly in love with her, but he already was. It was one of those he falls first tropes. So it was fun. But those spreadsheets are essential because you need and you can also put on one of the things which book they're introduced in and which ones they might be in afterward with question marks. Because I never know when I say, oh, that character back there that did this and this, hey, they'd be great now. They could be a new contact or a best friend or something like that. So
No,
it
that's a really good idea, Shelley, because they always say, cut your characters to the core, how many you need. You don't want a book with 35 characters, but when you're writing a series, you do need new characters. And it
yeah,
is always so great to pull them in from a previous book rather than creating a brand new character. And I think it makes it a lot easier for us too. But now you had also say that there are creative ways to help writers get the creative juices flowing in a fun way, and that's with character dialogue. So, how do you start with character dialogue?
Okay, now I have something I'm going to read you that's actually very fun because I was casting around for what to write for a blog. It wasn't that I had a writer's block. I was looking for, oh, what can I write that I haven't written yet, you know? And I'm saying, now right there in the background, you can see this book. This is my prequel to my series. It's called Love at First Sight. Shelley Sommers is me. And there are my two characters who I'm going to now read a dialogue with them that I wrote as my blog. And this gave me so many ideas because you may know, are they shy? Are they outgoing? Are they honest? They're liars. Are they a slob? Are they very closed and not? And I probably dated somebody like all of these kind of people before I met my husband. And we've been married over 30 years now. So it's done well. But I'm going to read you about these characters. One of these is Shannon. The young woman is Shannon. She's a freshman going to school. And her soon-to-be husband is John, and he's a very forthright, outgoing, kind of brash person, but so he's quiet because he's an engineer and he likes to think about things a lot. But she's very outgoing. She's done a sculpture. She's a marvelous artist. She comes by it honestly because her mother is an artist too, and so she's got a beautiful sculpture in a park that her city. She won a contest and they took her sculpture. So these are the people who are the main characters in my book that I did. And other than Louisa as my first character, I was excited to write about them because they're her parents. So it's fun to kind of have an origin story that came to me after. Now, I'm saying there are three characters in this dialogue I'm going to read you. And it's a lot of fun because they're not exactly nice to me, the author. They're kind of rude and mean because they don't like being jerked around as characters. So I introduce them, and you don't have to hear them introduced again. And then I'm Shelley Sommers and John and Shannon. And so I have they sit down and I ask who'd like to ask the first question. And John says, I'll defer to Shannon. This was her idea. That's my John voice, deep. And then Shannon says, John, thank you. You always put me first. Okay, Miss Sommers, I'd like to say thank you for creating us. Sometimes I almost feel as though I can hear you in my head. And then I laugh. Yeah. The feeling is mutual. Sometimes both of you say things that make me laugh. Please, what's your question, Shannon? I have several, but my first question is, why did you create us? Funny thing about that, I woke up one morning and both of you, plus Louisa, and your whole family were in my head. I've been touring the vineyards in Temecula, and my brain cooked up all of you in my sleep. See, it's useful. Wow, with all the details, with most of the details, after writing the first book, Louisa's Passion, I decided I needed to write a prequel. I'd already written the second and third books, just my QC. I'd already written the second and third books, Will's Secret and A Vision of Home, but they needed editing and preparation for publishing. At first, I couldn't decide who should be in the prequel, but then I knew it had to be you two. Oh, I don't think I told you yet. You're the parents of Louisa, who I just mentioned. Oh, John, we are having a little girl like we talked about. I'm so excited. So, Miss Sommers, did we have the son we talked about too? Are you sure you want to be sharing all of this with us? That's John. I'm fine with this, but I'll let you know when I don't feel like I can share everything. Since it's my turn, I'll share with you that we've had premonitions, or in my case, dreams, that we're going to have the two kids we've agreed upon. My dream was very vivid. See, you don't even need me. But what is the reason for our existence? Like any other author, the story just had to be written. I'm really very fond, maybe like a doting aunt of both of you. It can't be that simple, Miss Sommers. It is. I feel compelled to write about you both. I hate to give you a hard time, but frankly, it sounds like a boring story. Meet cute, fall in love, get married, have babies. Convince me I'd like to read that. Well, at least out of curiosity of what will happen to you. Since we're part of your imagination, maybe we could convince you to free us from the book. I don't have any idea how that could happen. Do you? Well, we're here now talking with you. That doesn't usually occur in real life. True. Is that all you want to ask? I'll be brave and maybe a bit rude. I've heard it said that writers are told to create scary stuff for the characters to experience. Have you created havoc for us? I'd rather not share that. These are happily ever after stories. Your story is a romance. Shannon says, that's wonderful to hear, Miss Summers. Lots of romance, like not behind closed doors? Yes, lots and lots of romance. You two do love each other, right? Very much so. What are we missing? What are you asking? Bluntly, what bad stuff have you written about that will happen to us? I'd rather not say. It'll spoil the happy times, kind of like, don't think about the purple elephant in the corner. There's a purple elephant? That's Shannon. She looks around. What? Where? See what I mean? You're evading my question, Ms. Summers. I don't want to be mean, but what are you going to do to us? Lots of amazing sex before anything otherwise happens. I'm at the can't share portion of our interview. That's not good enough. I don't want anything bad to happen to either of you. Please don't push. Maybe I'll need to wipe your memory of this meeting. Sounds bad. No hope? No hope? There's always hope. I'll just suggest that you enjoy every day. The phrase is carpe diem. I've learned a little Latin. That means seize the day, take everything that you can and enjoy it, right? That's it. Shannon, come on. She's not going to tell us what we really want to know. Let's go seize some days. That was rude, honey. You're not understanding the subtext, Shannon. Let's go live and enjoy life as much as we can. That's what I'm doing anyway, John. By the way, let's go spend some time seizing the day. Have a wonderful life, both of you. And they together say, we plan to. At least we know we're having the two kids. I'm going to learn how to knit so I can knit some baby clothes. You can't believe how much I love you, Shannon. I think I can. Let's go rehearse for having babies. John, that's something I can really enjoy. Oh, and Miss Summers, go see some days yourself. And she says, certainly, and thanks for coming in. So that was my dialogue with my characters. And I was laughing hilariously the whole time I was writing. It was like, oh my God. It's like
I've had conversations with my characters, but it's not ever funny. It's usually them telling me I don't want to do that, and I'm saying, but you have to. Like I don't make history. I write historical. I don't make history, but my characters have to live with history. I don't change history for them. So sometimes that's
well,
not easy. So what about show don't tell? How do you handle that when you have writer's block? You know that you have to start showing something. It's such a cop out to just say, oh, I will just make notes today because I really don't know what to do. But sometimes that really helps.
yeah, show not tell. All right. What you need to do is think of the senses. And this is something I've been immensely helped with neuro linguistic programming. A lot of people have heard about it over the years. I used to teach training programs for county government, and I would get them to recognize which form of communication they dealt with best. Were they visual? Were they audio? Were they audio? Or were they kinesthetic, touching? And I'm a kinesthetic visual person. I do better when I write notes down. If I don't write it down, I don't retain it. So my husband is an audio person. He's a musician. So he wants to have the sound. He sits working and he's playing music without words, but he's playing music. I can't focus. I have to have total quiet. And if there is noise, I grab some earplugs and put them in. So the good thing about neurolinguistic programming is you can decide what you need your characters to have as their main focus. And one way to do this with people, you can practice this way. We used to get in the elevator after my classes and I'd say goodbye, but in your own way. Somebody would say, see you soon. See, you'll be hearing from me, or let's touch base. You can guess right off the bat, touch base, kinesthetic, see you soon, visual, and you'll be hearing from me. So it helps you see, visual, people relate to you and how you can relate better to them. I make a serious effort, and I will tell my husband, I should speak in a whisper, that when I really want him to pay attention, I use musical words, I use audio things because he's going to relate to that better. And it was such a revelation to me to do that. That really helped. I think that's why we've been married almost 33 years now, just trying to relate and communicate. And that's what I think makes a difference. But I think that it's very, very hard for characters who you're creating from thin air, unless you're doing a historical of real people and then making fictionalized around. You've got to be able to have them um, write, or you've got to be able to write in the right way to bring this out. Whenever I'm really thinking, oh, this is a scene that really needs to be lush in terms of reaching people, I'll say things like, okay, we should use words that talk about the grass blowing and visuals, audios, the scent of it. And I try and really lay in, but maybe only one word, just to give the full sense of all your senses so that all the people with all their, now, most people, the majority of people are visuals, but say you're blind, then you got to be able to do other things. So I just try to lay in those elements that will help people see and show, not tell. If perfect example, we were watching the movie Age of Adeline, and in it there is a narrator, and that narrator will not shut up. And sometimes it got in the way, and for a while there was nobody narrating, and you could just watch them interacting, talking, touching, all these different things you want people to do. And then suddenly the narrator's back again, and it just ruins the moment. So you want to be able to find a way to talk about things, audio, so that people can relate to it and say, oh, I can almost see myself in the room. I was so thrilled when somebody wrote a letter for me to put up on my website and things like that. And she said, I can feel like I'm in the room with them. Then I knew I'd succeeded because I wanted her to feel that way. And so that's what helps with show, not tell. That's
Okay, using the senses, that's very good.
yeah.
And what about what do you think is your favorite and sticking strategy that you have tried, or one that you want to try? Or you said that maybe you don't ever have writer's block like the rest of us.
Oh, I do. I do. That was for journalism. That's very different. You've interviewed people for a reason. You took notes on what they said. Sometimes you caught them contradicting themselves. That's a winner. As a journalist, you want to catch somebody because that shows that they're not really doing their work and they're not doing what they're supposed to. But I think that when I was writing for this, all right, I'll give you a really hard example for me even to talk about. I was looking for something to happen in the first book. And I spent about 3 months doing avoidance. That's writer's block,
Mhm.
because I saw myself having my secondary character heading for being raped. And I couldn't do that. I couldn't write about it. I couldn't talk about it. Instead, I had her mildly, the boss at the bookstore she worked at after school was trying to molest her, but she never got raped. And that's what I settled for. And I made it very easy for her to get away from it. Louisa helped her get a lawyer. She thought to record it while he showed up the next time and starts being handsy with her. And she's going to win her lawsuit because she recorded him when she says, you shouldn't be touching me. Oh, come on. You want. So that was a very, very hard thing for me. Talk about avoidance, talk about block, right? I was in pain over it. I mean, I know people who've been raped, and it was painful. But what I do try to do, and I've been waiting for a good spot to talk about something fun. I think an important thing is to have a sense of humor about things. Now, I'm going to show you this. When my son was little, we read a book called Juggling for the Complete Klutz. I have 3 of these. This is the set. He has the book, I have the set. My son probably was about 5 or 6. And there was a chapter in there that said, it's teaching you step by step how to juggle. And suddenly it says, there's a subhead, it's called The Drop. And it says, take 1 cube and drop it on the floor. That's it. What? It just seems so ludicrous in the midst of all this. You need to do this and you need to do that. And it just says, drop it on the floor. And that became a cue word for laughter. If I call my son when he was grown up, and I have to do that now, and you remind me I haven't done that in an awful long time, call him up and say the drop. He will probably at least chuckle, if not break into, hilarious laughter. So you have to find ways to have it funny. That's why when I read you this scene from my blog, it's something that I felt it needed some levity. I'm writing all these serious things and suggesting, and my latest blogs are talking about these endless visits my doctor keeps sending me to because she decided that I'm of an age that I have to make sure everything's taken care of. And I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And I'm getting so stressed over the stress test that I'm falling apart. You just want to find a way to add some levity to things, because if you don't have humor, it becomes so grim. I actually stopped reading War and Peace. I lost a friend over it because first of all, everybody had several different names, and I can never keep track of who was all these different names. And I got to the point where I said, you know what? I'm tired. I have other things to do in my life. I'm not going to read it. I mean, War and Peace is a big, thick book, but usually that didn't bother me. But this was just, So as I said, I lost a friend. She was a Russian lit major, and she was mad that I couldn't read it. So we sort of fell apart, or she said I wasn't her person. So I think that
Dr. Zhivago, I started to read 3 times before I could finally get through it, for the simple reason there were too many characters introduced too fast, and
exactly.
you kind of like, you can't keep it in your head. So, but I would also like to talk to the people who have been on this video with us, to find out if
Okay.
anybody has, their own suggestions for overcoming writer's block, or if they got something, a particular thing that you said. So if anybody has any questions, they can put them in the chat, or they can, if you don't mind being on camera, although everybody has their cameras off, if you want to unmute yourself and ask Shelley a question, then we have a few minutes to do that.
May I give you one story that is the one that just melts my heart every time I think about it? I was teaching a class for people who could not get into community college. It was a college course in how to write. And this one woman showed up. She was probably in her 40s. She was very earnest. You could see her posture was very depressed. And I started giving them assignments, and she did every single one. She didn't complain. She did them. And by the last class, there was a 16-week session, the last class, the paper she turned in, one page, was beautiful. Her first paper was an F. It was word soup. But she learned, she worked, she put in the work, and that's what I'm implying. She put in the work, she did it. And the last one was so wonderful. I read it to the class without telling her I was going to do it. And she broke into tears. She was so thrilled. And she said, she walked me out of the class and said, I want to take you to lunch or dinner. It's not necessary. I'm so thrilled at your progress, but you saved my life. You've changed my life. And I said, how so? She said she was so embarrassed that she could not write. I mean, she really couldn't. It was all word soup with nothing making sense and no sentences. She had, I think she'd been somebody that was married to somebody who'd been in Vietnam, and she was a war bride kind. And she came back. She's a very hard worker, but she was in a position where she was never a supervisor. And suddenly they were promoting her, and she was going to have to write reviews of her employees. And she said, rather than be embarrassed that she couldn't, she didn't turn down the thing. She just quit the job. And I suppose that probably 10 to 15 or 20 years, she had been so depressed that you could see it when she walked in the classroom that first day. So what my life has been is trying to make people feel good about themselves, to learn how to write in a way that they can express themselves. Maybe they don't want to write a book. Maybe they just want a letter to apply for a job, or complain about what their HOA did to them or whatever. But I think that when you have that goal in mind, I mean, I'm an altruist, sometimes a realistic altruist, but an altruist. I want people to have that kind of wonderful thing about changing their life and feeling good about writing. Reading too, of course. So that's what I wanted to share before we hear about the things I might be able to help with. So that oh, and I have somebody else who I was tutoring. He was a homeschool kid. I was tutoring him how to write. And a few years later, His mother told me at a city meeting that her son had actually won a Fulbright scholarship, and he gave me total credit for helping him write so well. Fulbright scholarship.
Oh my
So I,
goodness.
yeah, so it makes you feel really good. I mean, I could quit writing, but I love writing. So I'm not going to, and I'm not going to let the writer's block stop me. That's all.
Okay.
Be
All
determined.
right.
So who
So
can I help?
last chance for anybody to ask questions. If you have them, either raise your hand or unmute yourself. I guess
Somebody?
not. All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here today, and thank you, Shelley, so much for coming. And I will try and get the video up tomorrow and send out the link, but it might be Saturday. It just kind of depends on my schedule. So, but anyway, thank you so very much.
Thank you, Paula Judith. I really appreciate the chance to talk to people and help them feel good about what they're doing. And I feel so amazed at what you do. Every time I turn around, there's another master summit thing. And I don't know, like I said, when I first started talking to you, when do you sleep?
Yeah, well, I'm cutting back on summits. Next year, I will do one summit for writing romance mastery. Um, and that's all I'm going to do because it's just been too much. This year has been very stressful. I've done 3 summits this year.
Wow.
And that's a lot to do. I did 2 romance summits and one co-hosted on a fantasy sci-fi summit. So I'm cutting that out, and I'm cutting out the winter writing romance mastery summit. Maybe that will give me a little bit more time to get back into my own
I
writing.
want to read more of your books.
Yeah, I know. I've had people, I still get emails of what happened to this other book because, I had shared like the first chapter with people. And
Mhm.
like, well, I'm still like in chapter 8 out of 40 some chapters.
All right, I'll make you the promise. Call me if you get blocked, and maybe after knowing, you tell me what your situation is, maybe I can give you something to push you right over the block.
That
I'll
might
do that
be.
for
I
you.
think what it is although I do usually outline, I think that this time my characters don't want to do anything toward the outline, and I realize I should just let my characters write their own stories. Sometimes it
See, like,
works out. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
thank you everyone for listening.
Okay. Oh, yes. And somebody says, thanks, Shelley. You reminded me to use NLP. It works. I teach multisensory and it works. Thank you very much for sharing,
Thank
Pam.
you. Thank you. That was great. Thank you all.
All right. Bye bye.